Bold, regal, and powerful. All adjectives that you could use to describe a certain mythological creature revered throughout time. In ancient China, dragons were wingless creatures associated with life, spring weather, stormy rains, and were generally seen as auspicious. One of the most famous Chinese dragons was the Azure Dragon, who is one of the 4 major Chinese constellations. You also had the Yellow Dragon, who was associated with imperial rule and whose depictions were limited to items directly used by the emperor. As the mythology of dragons spread, it traveled from China to Korea and then to Japan, where it took on additional cultural nuances, eventually even influencing modern-day perceptions, including, but not limited to, Tekken. In today's video, we'll discuss the detail of the Dragon's Nest stage, its historical and cultural touchpoints, and even touch a little bit on Pokemon. If you enjoy this type of video, subscribe for more. And with that being said, let's dive into Tekken 5. The Dragon's Nest stage is crumbling and barren on top of a mountain in what might be the Yellow Mountains in Anhui Province, famous for its stunning rock formations and the sea of clouds that emerges in certain weather conditions. Your characters stand among the gray skies with the wind whipping around them. On occasion, you'll see some fog roll in across the stage due to the height of the platform. The environment lends a very intimidating tone to this stage, where there's consequence for losing a fight this high up. The environment also hints that this area has long fallen out of use, with the broken bridges scattered around the stage. Perhaps this used to be some temple dedicated to a god or place of worship, but it looks like no one has bothered to come here in a long time. On the stage itself, the most prominent feature is the huge dragon carved from the mountain, looming overhead and watching our fighters with a close eye. The dragon holds a pearl in one claw, which in Chinese culture represents wisdom and spiritual power. And as a bit of a side note, the stone dragon texture here looks really good in my opinion, especially for the PS2. Next to the pearl you can see a small cave, perhaps leading to another location on the mountain, stairs to climb the mountain, or maybe another version of the stage. Scattered around the dragon are also what appear to be stone flames, which are fairly delicate pieces, but somehow intact after probably years of disuse. Moreover, past the flames, you can see another dragon in the distance wrapped around a mountain. This could imply that the mountain your characters are on isn't the only one to have a stage like this, and that there could be similar ones elsewhere. Along the stage, there's also these red broken pillars, with the color red representing fortune and prosperity in Chinese culture and often seen at weddings. These pillars are likely part of some sort of balcony structure that used to be here. Some of these red pillars are also attached to chains with bells on them, which could have some sort of religious connotation with Buddhism or Taoism, but it's hard to say. Sometimes these bells can serve as wind chimes or just for decoration. There is a crumbling stone fence along the perimeter of the stage, which was also likely once part of the same balcony structure. The symbol in the middle kind of looks like the symbol for Wu Fu Pen Shou, which roughly translates to 5 blessings holding longevity, but this is just an educated guess. The symbol is a traditional auspicious pattern meant to bless someone with a long life, and you would often see it on furniture or in homes. On the floor of the stage, you can see an intricate design with 2 dragons wrapped around a pearl of wisdom. And finally, on a side note, this stage also appears in the cinematic intro for Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, as well as in a number of story cutscenes such as Beck, Hwoarang, Roger Jr., and Wang. From a music perspective, the song, called Those Who Go to Heaven, starts out with this strong electronic melody that I think suits the stage well. It's a bit foreboding, which plays into the environmental storytelling with this rising tension that slowly peters out once it hits the second, more rock-like section of the song. You can hear heavy guitar and instrumentals, along with some background vocals and synth that add that classic Tekken feel. In general, I feel like Tekken 5 has the most variety in music in the series, and the composers are seemingly going out of their usual comfort zone to incredible results. It is a great song. And in the next section, I'll actually expand on this some more. But first, let's discuss the alternative version of the stage. We see a shift in the tone presented to us with 2 contrasting versions of the Dragon's Nest, one featuring dragons and one featuring tigers. In Chinese culture, while typically you see the dragon and phoenix appear together, such as in Fei Long stage and Street Fighter II, they were more so seen as complements to one another, often signifying marital bliss. On the other hand, dragons and tigers also had a long-standing relationship, but as opposites. As I mentioned before, dragons were a herald of spring rain, new life, and stormy weather. On the other hand, tigers represented death and the end of the life cycle, and were often associated with the color white. To that end, the white tiger was one of the major constellations as well in Chinese astrology, representing the west, while the azure dragon represented the east. These creatures were two sides of the same coin, wildly different, evenly matched, and mortal enemies, but unable to be separated and tightly interwoven by fate. To really showcase that sense of opposition, I believe that the developers created these stages with very different weather elements to emphasize this duality. In the tiger version of this stage, dark clouds and rain come down along with the occasional lightning strike, which I assume have lit fires on the bridge and ground here. It seems like the fires are centralized and not spreading, so I'm sure it's fine. The rain is relatively light, which may be because this is the calm before the storm. You'll also see lightning electrify the chain with bells on it, again adding to that more perilous atmosphere with the fire and electricity, definitely raising the stakes for this fight. On the main stage itself, there are multiple tigers scattered around along with broken bamboo stalks and leaves. The floor has also changed, replacing the dragons with tigers. Despite the differences, however, the symbols on the stone fence here are the same, which makes me think that this probably takes place in a similar location. Moreover, you can see a stone dragon again in the distance, perhaps the same dragon in the previous stage's background, or maybe even the dragon's nest stage itself, or maybe that stage is through the cave here. It's hard to know for sure, but all I can say is that it's likely in the same neighborhood. The stage song is called Garden of the Tiger, which is appropriate considering the bamboo and tigers. And along with the shift in tone of the stage, similarly in the music we hear a lot more intensity right off the bat. You hear this heavy guitar come in, and then this almost religious vocalization, drums and synth counter melody, until the beat drops and the song becomes more of a heavy rock or metal piece with the rapping and other vocals. Throughout the song though, there's a lot of interesting traditional sounding flourishes. Another cool detail is that the singer says shock wave throughout the song, which creates a connection to those who go to heaven because that song does the exact same thing. Also, shock wave might be a nod to the lightning on the stage, and if so, that's really clever. I can appreciate a soundtrack that connects their songs together in almost like a narrative. Out of all of the Tekken games, I think that the original Tekken 5 and Dark Resurrection have some of the best songs, and this really just cements that in my mind. So, not only does Dragon's Nest appear in Tekken 5 and a future title down the line, but also in the Tekken spin-off Pokken. This won't actually be the only time where a Tekken stage is adapted into Pokken, but we'll talk about that some other time. And given that Pokken is mostly a Pokemon game with some Tekken nods, the atmosphere of the Dragon's Nest stage is a lot more cartoonish and colorful. I do think a lot of the gravitas of the stage is gone now, but this is more in line with this game's target demographic, which are kids, despite the fact that probably more adults buy Pokemon games than kids at this point, including me. According to the Ferrum Sports Broadcasting Company, which is a broadcasting network in this game's world, the official description of the stage is a solemn area marked by a statue of the legendary Pokemon of the skies, Rayquaza. Sitting at the top of a treacherous mountain peak, the arena is known to exist by few. And with that description in mind, let's talk about the stage itself. The biggest change is that all of the dragons around the perimeter have been replaced by Rayquaza from Gen 3 and Mega Rayquaza, who was introduced in Gen 6. Rayquaza itself is likely based off the Aztec deity Quetzalcoatl, who was a feathered serpent god, as well as the god of wisdom, corn, and a symbol of death and destruction. Rayquaza also likely took inspiration from the Ziz, a giant sky king bird from Hebrew mythology. The Ziz makes up a trio consisting of also Leviathan and Behemoth, and these three beings could very well be the inspiration behind Rayquaza, Groudon, and Kyogre, the three legendaries of Hoenn. The Ziz is also said to have a wingspan so large that it blocks the sun, protecting humans from turbulent weather. Given that Rayquaza's airlock ability also negates weather effects, this would make a lot of sense. My musings aside though, let's get back to the stage. The Rayquaza statue is holding an orb of synergy energy, which from a gameplay perspective is how you gain meter for supers and mega transformations. The floor has also been replaced by multiple Rayquazas, some clouds, and the synergy orb in the center. The weather is still cloudy, but with some sunbeams leaking through, and better aligns with the more cheerful tonal shift in the stage. Moreover, the broken down fence has also been removed, now with an artificial force field of sorts keeping your Pokemon inside the field. This field actually has a lore connection where it makes all Pokemon battling the same level. That way it makes sense when Mewtwo is battling Pikachu, for example. It also disables any type advantage that a Pokemon may have. Finally, you have the addition of many different Pokemon from Gen 3 and Gen 6 scattered around, which is cute and in theme with the stage, but you can also tell that the developers were cutting corners with some of these models since they're pretty low quality and hard to make out sometimes. First of all, there's a T-Rex Pokemon called Tyrantrum from Gen 6, and I think this Pokemon looks hilarious because it's almost like an inflatable doll since it's just rocking back and forth. But honestly, I kind of wish it didn't do this since I think the goofiness is a little bit distracting. The structure on this part of the stage is definitely some sort of temple now, and on the roof you can see Goodra, but this could also be Sliggoo from Gen 6, but again, because of the low quality, it's hard to tell. Altaria from Gen 3 is floating slowly above a nearby rock, and a fun fact is that Altaria is actually one of my favorite Pokemon from this gen because, come on, it's cute. Moreover, on occasion, you'll also see Noivern, also from Gen 6, flying by. A large Mandibuzz is sitting near the giant Rayquaza statue, just chilling. And right above Mega Rayquaza's head, Salamence has the best seat in the house on top of a mountain. There's also a Pokemon that flies by Salamence super quickly, so again, it's really hard to say what this is, but maybe it's Braviary or some other bird Pokemon. Finally, you have what almost looks like a path going to another part of the mountain, with a Pokemon smack dab in the middle. It kind of looks like an ant Pokemon, so I'm gonna say that this is Durant. My overall thoughts on this stage are that it is a clever adaptation of the original Tekken 5 stage. I like the addition of all the different Pokemon, a lot of which are actually dragon types, which is a cute touch. This isn't my favorite rendition of the stage, but overall it's very colorful and Mega Rayquaza is super cool. From a music perspective, the song here reminds me a lot of a dramatic scene in a superhero movie where the main characters are in this epic fight against their enemy. It also reminds me of a song from Tekken 7 called Desperate Struggle, but this wasn't out at the time yet. Overall, the song is much more of an orchestral piece. You have a choir, brass, strings, woodwinds, a drum set, and so on. I like it a lot, but I do think it's a little generic in the sense that I would have never guessed that this was a Pokemon song. It could really be used for any stage or movie, and I would have no clue. However, you could say that about a lot of songs from Pokken, and either way, I still like it. The Dragon Nest's most recent appearance is in Tekken 7, and is actually the only returning stage from the base game. An argument could be made that the Mishima Dojo is a returning stage since it was retconned into being the Haomaru stage, but that's a whole Ship of Theseus argument that I'll get into in a separate video someday. I'm not entirely sure why the Dragon's Nest stage specifically was the one to return. I've been digging for interviews but haven't found anything, so if you happen to know, please let me know in the comments below. This stage is tonally similar to the Tiger one from Tekken 5, and it feels like the calm before the storm with the darkened skies. The stage details, however, are more similar to the original Dragon's Nest stage, but there's no fog on the floor in this version. In the background, we see some temples in the distance. As mentioned before, these temples could be the same location as the stage from Tekken 5, but to me the mountains seem further away than before, so I'm not quite sure. I think it's likely somewhere else completely. Perhaps this is the mountain we saw with the dragon wrapped around it from before, or on another similar mountain. Anyways, my musings aside, let's talk about the closer elements of this stage. First of all, there's a temple structure with some hanging talisman and bells. This temple may look familiar since it's also in the Pokken stage. On top of the temple, we see the words Cilong, which translates to Dragon Temple. And in addition nearby, we see this broken bridge connecting the temple to the main stage. Along the stage perimeter, the old fences from before have been replaced with these dragon ones, which are also crumbling and in disrepair with the faded red paint. Along that fence, sometimes there are short red ribbons tied to the ends of the fence poles. Perhaps these served some sort of ritual purpose in the past, but maybe they're just decoration. You also have these large brown birds, which flutter their wings on occasion. And finally, you have the addition of these 3 large yellow flags on top of the scaffolding. This could have been used as a lookout or a shooting point for an archer, since perhaps these yellow flags represented a certain country, but who knows. The other version of the stage appears in round 3 and remains this way until the match is over. The weather from before has worsened, the skies are much darker, and the rain is much heavier. However, unlike the Tiger stage, Tekken 7 remains consistent with the dragon theme here. First of all, one difference is that you can see the rainwater pouring off the dragons, creating these small waterfalls. I really like the addition of this detail, which could have easily just been overlooked, but for me it adds to the more stormy and dangerous tone of the stage. Interestingly though, the birds haven't moved even though there's a huge storm going on outside, which I think is a bit odd since I would expect them to hide or something. You also see that the temple is lit up inside, which implies that someone might still be living there, so maybe this mountain isn't abandoned, but is just in really bad shape. From a music perspective, in the first round you have the song Dragon's Nest, Empty Your Mind First. It's a very energetic, almost optimistic piece with the entire song generated by synth and a strong underlying beat. It's definitely a song that gets you hyped up for battle. The second song, called Empty Your Mind Second, is similar sounding, again using only synth, but is a little edgier. The melody is in a lower octave and has a slower tempo than the previous song. I'd say that the song is something I'd expect to hear in a high-speed car chase and less so optimistic. Much like the Pokken stage, however, I feel like these songs could be substituted for any Tekken stage and I probably wouldn't know the difference. These songs aren't really memorable to me and are more atmospheric, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I just don't like it as much as the Tekken 5 soundtrack. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I replaced these with the ones from 5 in Tekken Tunes mode. Personally, I would have loved to hear some more traditional notes like in Garden of the Tiger, considering the inspiration for these stages, or maybe even a remixed version since the stage itself is a remix of a previous one. Bandai Namco did it before with the poolside and beach songs, which were brought back and remixed in Tekken 7, so I don't see why they couldn't do it here. I feel like I neglected to talk about Tekken for way too long, so thanks for waiting. This stage in particular was always super iconic to me, but I felt like it was overshadowed by the Moonlight Wilderness, justifiably so. That being said, this and the Moonlight Wilderness are the first stages that pop into my head when thinking about Tekken 5, and I'm glad I was able to highlight these stages. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and see you guys next time.